everybody. Welcome back to History with John. If you're joining us for the first time, this is a history series where we will talk about any form of history, this being from wars to religion to politics and even more. In today's episode, we will be talking about the Wendish people and their journey from Germany to a new life. We will discuss the matters that were going on in Germany that led to the immigrations themselves, and where they went, and a little bit of what they did when they got there. Today's episode, we will primarily discuss the immigration of 1854. 1854 immigration was when 500 Wendish families had left Germany for Texas. From this group actually comes my family. So, in my opinion, the Wendish history is something, and I think it's going to make a great, little series, like, what do you call it? Well, I guess you would call it a sub-series in this series. But a lot of people do agree that the Wendish history is pretty interesting. But other than that, let's go ahead and get on into it. So, who are the Wendish? The Wendish, or Serbs, are a Slavic group that come from Germany. They come from the Lusatia area in eastern Germany. They lived along these canals and on the Spree and Elbe rivers. They have their own culture and their own language. Example of the language is Dobranje, meaning good morning. But in 1817, the Prussian king Frederick Wilhelm III had wanted to reform all Protestant religions into one unionized religion, or Protestant religion, within Germany. Many of the Wends had denied this and stuck to the original Lutheran faith. Because of this, they were treated like second-class citizens, and they weren't eligible for schooling and all that. So, with all this going on, this would eventually lead to immigration. In 1838, the first immigration out of Germany. They left for America with 707 Wends, but while at sea, they ran into some storms and lost the ship Amelia. That had around 105 Wendish souls on board. All were lost, leaving only around 602 to arrive in the New World. So, after they would move into a little community in Perry County, Missouri. This would actually lay the foundations for the Missouri Synod, which we'll go over in another episode just about the Missouri Synod. But between 1838 and even up until the early 1890s, there were many immigrations, mostly to Australia, and then started coming to America. But in 1843, one immigration had gone to Texas. And in 1854, when the 500 Wends were preparing to set sail for Australia, they decided to change course to Texas. The Wends formed a immigration society. This would actually later change into a Lutheran congregation. Because it turned into a congregation, they would need some kind of spiritual leader. This is where Pastor Jan Killian comes in. But other than that, the immigration society was actually composed of these people. Carl Lehman was the president. Johann Karl Tennert was the vice president. Christopher Cockle, Johann Urban, Johann Hoyle, and Ernest Adolph Murby. He's actually my third great uncle. Him and his brother, my third great grandfather, were the ones that actually came over. But anyways, they would actually go on to contract out Valentin Lorenz Meyer, a Hamburg businessman who would secure passage to Texas for him. As they would begin to leave, the government and press would actually try and halter their departure. The press would print papers with fearful warnings, and Killian had to stay back as the Royal Prussian Circuit had indicted him for enticing immigration. This here was another attempt to further the Wends from leaving. he would go on to defeat the charges against him, and on September 12th, 1854, the main body of the Wends would actually go on to cross the North Sea to Grimsby, England. They would go down to Liverpool, where to wait for a bigger ship to take them to Texas. While waiting for the bigger ship, they would stay in these quarters just off the dock. Well, England during this time was not a very clean place, so what ended happening inside the 500 Wends was a cholera outbreak. Few had to stay, few died, and after they thought they had it under control, they boarded the Ben Nevis. The Ben Nevis is what they were waiting for. They loaded onto the Ben Nevis, which is the ship that brought them to Texas, and they sailed out. As they were passing Ireland, another outbreak occurred. They would dock in Queenstown, Ireland for 3 weeks. After cleaning the ship and everyone recovering, they would set sail for Texas once again. But this wouldn't be the last cholera outbreak. But on December 15th, 1854, the Ben Nevis would actually reach the Galveston shore. The group made their way up to Houston and would stay in Houston for a little while before they would journey out to find a place to settle. They actually sent scouts ahead to go find land, and they had found land just off of the Rabs Creek in what is today Lee County, just outside of Giddings, exactly. So the Wends would, in January of 55, head out of Houston on ox cart, wagons, all that, to Serbin. Well, before Serbin, they would head out to that area. They would actually purchase acreage for $1 per acre from Absalom Delaplane, who was a landowner in Lee County who had settled 20 years prior before the Wends. This would begin what is called the Delaplane League. That is something else for another episode. Get more detailed into stuff, as this is just how they got to Texas and they settled. But each family was given a certain amount of land to do what they pleased with. My third great-grandfather, Ferdinand Jacob Murby, was given 70 acres to farm. With that, the Wends went on to found Serbin, the first Wendish settlement in Texas. Before the church was built, they would use Killian's Cabin, which is still in Serbin, as the parsonage church, and Killian would also live there. It wasn't until 1871 when the church building was completed, which you can still go and see the church if you travel down there. It is a painted church of Texas. Inside the church, the pulpit stands 20 feet off the ground, making it the highest pulpit in Texas. After some time, the Wends would start moving out and founding sub-colonies such as Warda, Fedor, Swiss Alp, Giddings, Port Arthur, Monheim, Copper's Cove, Vernon, Walberg, The Grove, Bishop, and many more. It's our first episode of History with John. I can tell you this is not the end of the Wendish history here, and I would definitely come back to talk more about, such as with the Saxons breaking off from the St. Paul Lutheran Church and founding the St. Peter's Lutheran Church, and how this actually happened twice. So, other than that, I hope you enjoyed this episode and hope you've learned something new, and we'll return for more. This has been John, and I'll see y'all in the next episode.